Welcome everybody to this second panel of the morning. My name is Alessandro Torello. I'm a director for energy at Ruth Pedersen, which is a pan-European consultancy. We have offices across 20 member states, and Brussels is one of the largest ones. Welcome again. We're going to talk grids now, talking about the grids package, its impact, what's right, what's wrong, what needs to be improved, and what's good in it. I think, just to set the scene a bit, I think actually grids are probably the only, or one of the few, topics that catalyzes two of the top priorities in Europe, right? Competitiveness. Without grids, an operating grid, we have no business in Europe, no life, almost. And transition, the climate benefits from electrification. So obviously, a working grid is essential to the climate transition. We have the grids package now, which was presented late last year. So we know what we're talking about, more or less, because it's a big document, very comprehensive. Negotiations are just starting. In the council, they have already picked up some pace, and we have already seen some dividing lines in the parliament, still early days. But it all means that this is a topical moment to discuss the grids package. And to do this, we have eminent speakers, which will have plenty to say and will introduce themselves. I'll just mention the names and their roles. Annegret Gröbel, President of Council of European Energy Regulators. Susana de Almeida de Graaf, hello, who is Vice President of ENTSO-E. And has a big role in TenneT, of course, as TSO. Romy Garrod-Verdier, who is Head of European Affairs at Enedis, one of the most prominent DSOs in Europe. And Aline van der Veen, who is our scientist in the panel, who is a senior scientist at TNO in the Netherlands. Before kicking off the discussion, and I think I'm going to divide it in a few areas which I think are important for the grids package. But I would like to have your view of the grids package. So I was thinking, why don't you give me each 3 words of what you think about the grids package? The first 3 words that come to mind when you think about the grids package.
So it's, I would say, about reforming the planning process and making investment analysis and speeding this all up in order to ensure that the transition goes smoothly. It was more than 3 words, sorry.
So if you have to pick 3, transition?
Transition, grid acceleration, and synchronization.
Okay, good. Susanna.
Well, oh, sorry.
It's okay, I don't know if everyone can hear.
Now I know. To not repeat the words, I would say the grid package enables security. Infrastructure is security, decarbonization, because we need the infrastructure for the volatile renewable energy sources we want to deploy, and also competitiveness, because then we make the puzzle in a way that we bring the competitiveness and the affordability into play.
Yes, and then my words, I look more to make this happen, like competitiveness. I think making the grid smarter, making it digitalized, but also the future-proof regulation, that's also part of it. That are the points that I look at.
I fully agree with what was mentioned before, but if I were only one word, it would be finally. After more than 20 years of electricity regulation, we have one grid package. For the first time, the grids are at the forefront of the European regulation. 20 years of regulation, and during almost 19 years, if you want to look at grids, it's in Annex 8, page 400. So finally, we are at the forefront, which is the reality of the electricity system right now.
Okay, better late than never, I would say. Actually, my take here is that it's mostly positive, mostly a positive approach, I have the feeling. But let's see in the debate how it goes. Maybe it's just a good start of the debate. Let's see if we find criticalities as well. So I think there's 4 areas that I would like to explore, and by no means they are the full energy grids package, but 4 important areas: investment, flexibility, which we discussed before, digitalization/security of the system, and permitting, which obviously comes up all the time, and it's, in terms of, if we think about timing, is crucial. I go to Annegret first. Investment. How do you see from CER the perspective on investment in the grid?
Yeah, I mean, as we said also as was said this morning, of course, investment is key in order to have enough capacity and synchronize it with the development of renewable generation. So I think these 2 must be synchronized, and I think it is also key that this is done as effectively and cost efficiently as possible, and that is the core viewpoint perspective of the regulators. So how to ensure the planning is properly done, taking into account both the European needs, in particular cross-border interconnections, as well as the bottom-up perspective that we as national regulators, of course, bring with us to align it with the national plannings, the NCEPs, etc., etc. And this is something which the package with the proposals of the 10E amendments is kicking off, but I think the debate just started. So I think we would have we published just a short statement on this, a paper. We see that there is some more need to, let's say, fine-tune the proposals in order to get this bottom-up perspective from the regulators. But what we, of course, welcome very much is that there is an increased role of the regulators in driving the process, in speeding up the process, because I think that is something which will also, in the end, lower the costs if it is done properly. Yeah, so that's something that I would like to say. And the other thing that I would like to say is, and this is also in in our statement, but also in the package, that the different processes, the planning process, the needs analysis, etc., are put together, yeah, so that we are not having 3 different exercises about, let's say, the adequacy planning, etc., but that we align it with the European targets and with the various instruments that we have already in terms of preparing, planning, a grid for Europe.
So going in the right direction, some fine-tuning needed.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting into the fine-tuning. Susanna, what's the perspective from the TSO?
On
investment.
On the infrastructure, on the investment.
Yeah, on investment, and is the grid package going in the right direction? Do we need a lot more?
So I have a few messages here. The first message is infrastructure is the future of a complete puzzle, because it's not only about the grid, it's the European ambition together with the grid, where industry, the decarbonization, the renewables integration, all the diverse resources that can provide the grid support and needs the grid to keep the lights on. So ENTSO-E estimates that 800 billion euros of investment is needed by 2050 in cross-border interconnectors, but also hybrid interconnectors and offshore grids. So it's indeed a massive investment. And I think when we are doing the grid planning, we need the integration of the European ambition and the national realities. What you saw this morning is Europe and the member states looked like 2 different sides, which is not true. The member states are Europe, and the member states should feel in the society, and politically they should feel Europe. And I think when we are planning the grids, we need this in the integration of the European ambition together with the national plans, because it needs to be an integral exercise for the entire system. We cannot ignore that there is a national perspective and a European ambition that need to come together. I think from the ENTSO-E perspective, ENTSO-E is really thinking that we need grids. We need grids because these grids prove that €1 invested is a €2 saving in system costs. This is something that is important to be aware. This morning, we also spoke about the 70% capacity guarantee of the clean energy package. I can tell you that TSOs are committed to give as much capacity to the market as possible. But there are moments to provide the 70% capacity, there's redispatch correction after the capacity is given because there's not enough grid at some moments for that ambition. And that means a societal cost, which hinders the investment and the social welfare numbers that we saw this morning. And another thing is that ENTSO-E believes that the Connecting European Facility budget will need to increase 5 times in the future. And I think for now I stop.
All right, on a 5 times number, yes.
Yeah, that is in the positions of ENTSO-E.
Remy, what's the position of DSOs? Are you looking at similar numbers in terms of investment needs? And is the grids package going in the right direction in terms of fostering those investments?
The TSOs are investing definitely a lot and will continue to do it. If you had a look at the Grid for Speed study coming from EU Electric, you will have the numbers, that big numbers, that 600 billions that are needed to invest, to have a smart grid, a smart distribution grid, able to make the energy transition a reality. Within Enedis, the French DSO, we invest something like 5.5 billion per year. And what we try to explain is that we are facing what we call in France the second electrification of the country. That's why we do need to invest. When we mention, like the colleague previously from Octopus, or when we look at the Grid for Speed study or what ENTSO-E is doing, it's always very, very big numbers. But if we compare those numbers with the fact that the EU is importing fossil fuel every year for 400 billion euro, it's nothing. It's definitely nothing, and it's worth it. Thanks to those investments to the grid, the energy system will be more efficient, more secure, and of course, cleaner. That's the beauty of those investments. And the second key point is, thanks to the electrification, if there is much more electrons, it means that the cost of those investments per electron will not be higher. So it will not be more expensive for the consumers. That's the key point of what do we need a strong electrification. So how do we invest in a company like Enedis, covering 95% of France and serving 40 million customers? We have an ongoing permanent dialogue with the local authorities. So it's coming from the ground. It's definitely a bottom-up approach. We have 900 offices in France, discussing with all the mayors of the local authorities, all the region, and based on that, we build our distribution network development plan, feeding the plan of the TSO, and then at the end feeding the TYNDP. So back to the grid package, that's why we are not fully welcome the idea of a central scenario. We fully support the idea of a bottom-up approach coming from the field.
One question that I have on investments is the division between public and private, right? We're talking about huge amounts of zeros in numbers. And one of the things where usually Europe is behind is actually in private investments in infrastructure compared with the US or Canada or some more Anglo-Saxon type of market-oriented economies. How do you see the role of private investments in fostering the development of the grid? I don't know.
I can also give an example because I spoke to someone in Parliament in the Netherlands that was back in the days one of the persons that chose for a split to really make a a clear split between private and public. And back then he said, now, for example, when the gas crisis was there, they were able in the Netherlands to scale up the LNG terminals very fast because of this split. And while in other countries where you don't make this split, you first have to discuss with with the private sector whether such investment is a good idea. They can make different choices, but this was an illustration of like a good split. At least he was, with hindsight, he said, yeah, we made a good decision back then. But yeah, it's always, it has pros and cons. But if you want to be also resilient and move fast with investment, but also making it resilient, I think a good split is kind of a security that you can move.
So hand in hand. Hand
in hand, yeah. On the other hand, I think inviting the private sector to really challenge the public investments is very important. Another example, there's now large investments in the distribution grids and in the Netherlands. And we see that distribution grid operators try to think, oh, how can we make it happen with all kind of smart devices? And they say, no, it cannot be done with batteries, way too long time periods. So it needs to be done with fossil fuel. But then we asked the market, and the market said, no, we can do it. We can run the batteries in parallel in different locations. And the DSO never thought about that. Well, the entrepreneur said, of course, I can make that happen. You just have to ask me. So this kind of creativity is also there in the private sector and is not in the grid investment models always. So I would definitely invite private sector to challenge plans.
Thanks, Rina. That's topic because the second theme I was going to discuss is flexibility, and we just talked about batteries. So we talk a lot about grids and infrastructure and permanent infrastructure, but of course flexibility is part of the whole picture. What's the view from TSOs about flexibility, and how can we actually increase it? Because it's one way to help support the grid.
Before I go to the battery example, the view of TSOs is yes, as much flexibility as possible in the right volume at the right location. And it's not grid or flexibility, it's grid and flexibility. Because we want to have a puzzle that is integrated. We, of course, know that grids take time to build. And we also know that independent of how much grid we build, it will never be an infinite capacity grid. And we also know that the grid and the flexibility are not solely playing alone either. They are part of an integrated market. And this integrated market needs to facilitate competitiveness, liquidity, but also it needs to help us to keep the lights on. So I can give an example. Flexibility is absolutely essential in a RES-dominated system because the sun doesn't shine always, the clouds are not always predictable, and the wind is not always there. And even when there's windstorms, the wind availability becomes disturbed. So flexibility is absolutely helpful in many situations. One of the situations is a classical one that we all heard about, which is the Dunkelflaute. Imagine that there's no wind and no sun, and then. And this is a type of flexibility that is more long-term. Probably multinational, because that means that several countries are affected by this Dunkelflaute. So this is the long-term flexibility perspective. But we also have the short-term flexibility perspective, because I'm here representing as Vice President ENTSO-E, but I actually have 2 control rooms in the Netherlands that are keeping the lights on all the time, 365 days, 24/7. And they need to keep the system in balance all the time. So the load and the supply and the demand need to be in balance continuous. They need to maintain the network free of congestion. We don't want lines that are heating up too much or that pose safety issues for society. They need to keep the system stable. So flexibility is absolutely determining for keeping the lights on. For instance, in Spain, they have industrial flexibility that is activated in 15 minutes. Well, if we are in trouble and we need at the right location a resource that goes up and down and 15 minutes does the deal, that's a service that industry, for instance, can provide to the system. Speaking about batteries, yes, batteries are part of the puzzle. They can definitely help, but there's another side of the coin, because also the batteries are there for revenues. And they are there, for instance, participating in a type of market closer to real time, which is the balancing market. And that means that they are going to give their flexibility to the balancing market, probably in a moment where there's no consumption, and they will overload the DSO network where they are in feeding, if it's in the in-feed direction, or becoming a load if it's in the load direction. So the puzzle needs to fit together. And all resources, all connected parties, industry, households, we heard this morning demand-side response, they need to be part of a bigger puzzle. Imagine that the whole Europe goes to dynamic pricing, and all the consumers will react at the same time to a price signal in a certain direction. If I have, for instance, more than 2 gigawatts response, or 3 gigawatt, which is a reference incident in Europe, that everyone switch up or down, creating a delta of more 3 gigawatts in the whole Europe, it's not guaranteed that we will be able to guarantee the system in balance. And yes, the flexibility is also absolutely important in disturbed scenarios. It's part of the emergency and the restoration plans, needs to be, because the Netherlands has 25 gigawatts of installed PV, many of them rooftop in the households. So when there's a blackout, we need to take that into account, and we need to activate the flexibility to restore the system together with the resources that are distributed in the system. This comes with also a legal and regulatory framework, comes with unlocking the technical capabilities in the resources to actually be able to make this happen. But yes, it's absolutely essential. And there's another piece of the puzzle, which is DSO-TSO cooperation, because in the future, many of the resources will be in the DSO network. And it's absolutely essential that we work together in all these moments, solving congestion, that when we activate resources, we don't have a conflict action between each other, that we together, with the market, with the customers, really help Europe to have this ambition of independence and decarbonization. And we give to the European society the reliability level they have today.
I think, Remy, I'm going to have to ask you for a
Thank you.
jump in the conversation.
That's granted that the flexibility are developing quite fast and quite well on the DSO side and on the TSO side. If we just look at the number within these, over the 2 last years, we have multiplied by 6 the activation of flexibility on our grid, and we also have awarded 46 megawatt of flexibility. And now what we are currently doing is to add more off-peak tariff during midday. Just to give you the landscape in France, the off-peak tariff currently are during the night, starting at 10 p.m. Till 7 a.m. in the morning. It was designed end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, to provide load during the night for the nuclear power station. So those off-peak tariff will remain the same for the consumers, and we are adding more off-peak tariff during midday when the renewables, especially the solar panel, are generating a lot. So that's one way to develop flexibility. I cannot agree more on what you mentioned about flexibility and investments. We are strongly against the narrative that opposes flexibility and investments or network expansion. And I will give you a scoop. We, DSOs, we are not building grid for fun. That's not true. We do like the grids, but we are not making grids for fun. we are making grid, building grids when we need more grid. And we need more grid, as there is new connection, electrification of the mobility. So that's why we are building grid. And with the flexibility, what we do more with the same amount of capex. So there is it's a leverage. Flexibility, it's definitely a leverage. With the flexibility, we do more without spending much more. That's why we are playing the game of the flexibility. And for that, there is the best tool ever, which is the smart meter. Without the smart meter, it's definitely complex, difficult to perform flexibility. And we also need, you mentioned it, a strong coordination between TSOs and DSO. And to do so, for the first time ever, we managed, I will not say it was easy, but we managed to draft on an equal footing the network code on demand response. So for the first time, TSOs within the EU DSO entity and TSOs within ENTSO-E, we managed to draft a single common network code on demand response, which is the common level playing field for the flexibilities, and it will help us a lot. And of course, is the development of flexibility at TSO and DSO level in a perfect coordinated way.
That sounds like a question for the audience. Who's building grids for fun here in the room? Somebody raises his hand. Welcome to the panel, please. Remy, just follow up on this. How do consumers perceive this? Is it, what's the feedback that you get? You're getting a lot of cooperation in terms of flexibility. You have a hard time pushing for it. What's the dynamic?
Consumers, they do like off-peak tariff. That's as simple as that. If you communicate in a proper way, if you explain how it works, and with the strong support of the suppliers, thanks to the smart meter, building adapted offer based on the way you consume electricity, consumers are in. They want to play the game. They, like all of us, they understand that if they switch on the washing machine when it's off-peak tariff, it's much better. They do understand if they charge the car when it's off-peak tariff, it's much cheaper. And they also do understand, we are not silly consumers. They do understand how it works. When it's shiny, solar PVs are generating a lot, filling the grid, it means there is cheap electricity. That's the good time to consume. So instead of charging the car once back home at 8 p.m., charge it during the afternoon. It's off-peak, you are serving the system, you are increasing the stability of the system. They do understand that perfectly well, perfectly well. We have on our side, DSO side and TSO side, plus the supplier. We have to explain that, to be transparent, to be clear, to also be transparent within the bill. It must be perfectly transparent on the bill, but it works. It works.
I think we're slowly closing the loop here and coming back to you, Annegret, if we start talking about transparency, bills, etc. So what's the perspective from regulators on flexibility?
Of course, we also think that flexibility is a rather important tool, and that everything has to be done in order to, again, plan it in and factor it in more systematically than what is currently being done. So I think that is something that the proposed amendments hopefully will bring, which I mentioned at the very beginning. And of course, we also see that this is when it works as described, I should say, then it is a benefit for consumers. But we must also see that we need to be not only transparent vis-à-vis the consumers, but potentially also a little bit, I would say, educative. because, and that is something that of course also falls upon the regulators, and the regulators also provide the incentives when there will be a new, for example, we are looking at the network structure, network tariff structure, which is, I think, important because it was designed way back when there was not so much flexibility in the system. So I think in order for the consumers to benefit from this and be responsive to the price signals, we need to restructure the tariffs in most cases, I would say. I mean, this varies, of course, a lot among member states, because otherwise they will probably not turn on the washing machine if the difference and the savings is not big enough. And of course, you need the smart meter, etc. So I think that is something that goes together with the digitalization that we mentioned. This is for the consumers that are more, let's say, active, but we should not forget about, let's say, those consumers that are not in a position to make use of it. Yeah, so they still need to have to be protected and not to be that we don't have a let's say an anti effect that then may bring the most vulnerable users to not profit from the transition, which basically then means we don't have the just transition. So we are looking at CER a lot in how to ensure that we can bring all the consumers benefits to the system, also those that might not be so active as others. Yeah, so I think that is something that we are looking at a lot, and where I think we still have to feature to redesign tariffs to have the benefits distributed equally across all consumers.
And is it something that you think is possible across Europe?
Yes, I think absolutely. And what we do a lot in CER is indeed having discussions among us, what worked and what did not work in the countries. Of course, it depends about consumers may have different preferences in different countries. The state of rollout of smart meters might be different, yeah. But in the end, I think it will work across all countries, maybe in one country faster than in another one, yeah. So that is something. And that, of course, then also brings can bring benefit to the whole Europe system when there is enough cross-border capacity. So switching to the next level, because otherwise, then let's say the benefits cannot spread out across Europe. So that is something where we indeed need to work on the deepening of the internal energy market from bottom up to the highest transmission level, because otherwise the internal energy market will not bring back the benefits to all the consumers. And of course, I think we have heard it this morning. All this is still in progress, and we have to be transparent that the process may take longer and the benefits of the energy transition than originally expected. Yeah, so I think that is something which doesn't mean we shouldn't go down this road. Yeah, definitely we should. But I think the critique that sometimes comes from various sides that it is too much of a clean energy transition is not justified. But it needs, of course, to be explained how long it takes and that there are costs involved in changing in investing. Yeah, that is something that was mentioned also this morning already.
Okay, no, thank you. It's really interesting. I'll go back to the cross-border dimension in a few minutes. I'd like to bring in Aline, because of course we discussed digitalization, which is crucial to what we're discussing right now. So
it's very relevant, this discussion, also what you're saying. I try to connect it a little bit. I think Susanna mentioned the risk of everyone responding to a certain incentive. And that kind of incentive comes from, I call this implicit signals. So that the signals that Yeah, that's just there. You get it one way. So there's one-way signal to a consumer and a consumer response. And that's a simple way of working. And that is, I think, a really nice start. Like this dynamic grid tariffs, it makes people aware that it is the case. And it works to a certain extent very well. Academics all agree that's highly risky to design a system in that way. Well, I'm an applied researcher, so I see it a little bit lighter. I think it's a really good basis. But the moment you introduce more smartness in the system, so demand response, and in particular storage, like vehicle to grid, batteries, home batteries, if they also take part of the picture, then I think you should move, and that is also what Anna mentioned, is that you should look at your state of your also of digitalization and smartness in the system, because when the smartness kicks in, everyone will if there's no further incentives, there is between the block, when the block price changes, you get a very large response that the balancing market has to do. I think it can be solved easily, give suppliers a large task in estimating it and also make them able to utilize this flexibility. So we should move from this single-way response, which is a good starter. I think in many countries, oh, please start with it, right? It's fine. The second wave, and in the Netherlands in particular, we have digitalization moves on. We see a lot of energy management system behind the meters. I think we shouldn't stick too long with just implicit signals. We should move to two-way signals. Incentivize consumers to give their forecast to their suppliers. Yes? Or give them the data so this supplier can make forecast. Because suppliers at the end, they have to calculate all these aspects and motivate them to not charge this peak that will cause them additional balancing costs. And this should also be reflected in the regulating of supplier and retail tariffs, because retail tariffs, they also a bit strict and for a very good reason. But I think some more flexibility is needed. But it is really different per country. I had lately some discussions on Romania versus Netherlands, right? On energy sharing, for example. I would make totally different choices. And that's I think hard for the harmonization in Europe. But if we can define these stages and future-proof regulation, which is also part of the grid package, I believe a bit in that, in more adaptable, situation-aware regulation, because the state of digitalization will be different.
What's the recipe to try and bring harmonization across Europe? Of course, you have it.
Yeah, I very much like the harmonized role model of also and they try to really get harmonized view on all the small elements that are similar. And you can do the same for tariffs, etc. It's quite some work, and I think you should only do this with experts, not involve everyone. But somehow at least understanding how things are different, and it's really in the details. For example, the supplier of last resort, it's totally different implemented in Portugal, for example, versus Netherlands. And that makes that people see also the role of the commercial suppliers in a very different way. I had so many discussions and we really understood each other. And this made me realize, like, hey, you should have a good picture of how the market is organized, also in this retail sector. So I would like, for example, in the Smart Energy Expert Group that we have now under here in Brussels, that it's good that we get a bit better picture on that aspects, because this is the devil is in the details of the organization of the retail market, and we shouldn't make it all one, because I don't believe that will fit. It's also history, it's culture, it's state of digitalization, but at least we should understand the differences, and that helps to move further. So not harmonize it, but make it make a harmonized picture of all the diversity that's there. That's the starting point.
I think that I agree, and I can only recommend to you, there's the ASA JCR, a joint report on retail market monitoring, where we also have descriptions of different pictures, and then there's also on the ACER website a sort of dashboard on the various retail markets in Europe. Because, as you said, they are quite different. Even if we are moving towards, let's say, more harmonization, but not uniformization, I think that is an important distinction to make.
So I start by understanding each other, and then we'll think about harmonizing, basically.
Yes,
That's the first step too. Yeah. You mentioned data sharing, and that brings up the whole dimension of security, really, which is, of course, topical today. How can we actually make sure that the grid is secure in terms of, I mean, of course, not only in terms of data sharing, but cybersecurity in general?
Yeah, there's very much a lot of different aspects on security and resilience. So I think it starts with physical resilience, to know what parts does the grid have? What if a bomb drops there or on the, I would say, the spot market auction house, right? It can be anywhere. This kind of starting point is the first. So first, then you look at the same, and we call this critical elements because there's a critical resilience act as well. I think it's a very good starting point. And then the next layer is to look at the cybersecurity aspects of these critical elements. Then you can look at the NIS2, also more generic type of cybersecurity legislation, and you need to iterate this also to the Data Act and the AI Act, of course. So there are many aspects, but I would build it up from elements, parties, and processes. Right? Get that in the picture, data is one thing, but the data, the sensitivity of a certain data, a point you cannot judge in general. You can only judge it in context, right? That's why I would start with the critical processes first, and then look at data. If you start with data, oh, this is critical data, that's sensitive. No, it really depends. So build it up and look at from information, because data is information, it's not just data. And look at that. And so I think this critical resilience act, we can use it a bit broader, also for cyber. I think as a good basis, at least, in these acts. And it's hard to do it really good. Also include the Data Act. And particularly also the risk of AI. It's hard to judge that and to interpret it, because there's some interpretation issues as well in how to connect the different electricity sector legislation to the more generic resilience and data acts.
Remy, what's your feeling about the data that you get? Is it comprehensive enough to help you move in the right direction?
Indeed, within this we have a very ambitious, back to the security question, a very ambitious open data strategy. And then a few months ago, with the French TSO, we have decided to remove some of the data from the open data portal. They were too precise, too much detailed, and offering opportunities to say to feed terrorism behaviors. So our open data and our strategy is still really ambitious, but with much more aggregated data than before, to ensure that you will not get too precise information about the infrastructure. The second topic regarding cybersecurity for us is by design. So it means we need a strong partnership with the manufacturers to have this cybersecurity. It's not an additional layer on the top of everything existing. It's by design. And we do welcome, looking at Tom's side, we do welcome the Cybersecurity Act revision, saying clearly that we will be able to disqualify manufacturers that are coming from countries that are definitely not our friends. We must do that. That's That's a must. And this revision of Cybersecurity Act is going the right way. And last but not least, cybersecurity is expensive. And for me, there is a strong connection between cybersecurity and the revision of TSOs, especially the CEF. The CEF fund. We need to be able to use the CEF fund to fund cybersecurity in an interconnected way, in an interoperable way. Maybe that's a point with the TSOs we agree to disagree on, but with 95% of the CEF going to the TSO and only 5% going to the DSO, this is not balanced. This is not balanced. And as the role of the DSO is increasing, the way we share the CEF should be better balanced. And we advocate for more CEF for the DSOs. And of course, we also advocate saying within the CEF, there is this idea of cross-border. That's great. But cross-border is not only building a line crossing a border. Cybersecurity tool, common cybersecurity tool, sharing data, interoperability is also something with a cross-border dimension. So I used to say that we love greed and we are not greedy, but we need more CEF and to better balance the CEF between the DSOs and the TSO, especially for cybersecurity. And the way the world is running for us means that we have to work all together with that and to better share the available funds.
Maybe to respond, I recognize this choice because of geopolitical changes, that the transparency, that how we think about it changed. And this happened also in Netherlands, where also some data was removed from platforms. And you see that from the other side, from efficiency of the market, transparency is so much welcome. But I see a way out is to focus on these processes. So if there are market roles that have it, you can also screen them and really indeed look at equipment that they use. So I would plan for define processes clearly, what, and it's already mostly there, the right roles, and scan these companies from top to bottom, because then you can, like energy suppliers, and only share data with the parties that have a certain role in the process. It's, of course, I would like to see more transparency. Sometimes we voted for radical transparency a few years ago, but because there are always actors that you cannot. It's very hard to think what they could do. You cannot think of all these unknown scenarios that someone could do. So it's better to have a need-to-know basis for certain data sharing. And I think that's different from how I also personally thought about it a few years ago.
I think the mindset is changing. I think the awareness is increasing, but I also think the threat is increasing. And critical infrastructure is security. Like I started today, infrastructure is security, and this security dimension, physical or cyber, needs to be in the legislation, but also in the awareness and the mindset of all of us. If you search in the internet for the cyber attack in Poland, in the beginning of this year, you will find out that it's not about the DSO or the TSO, it's also about the resources that are deployed in the system. They also play a role in security. And yes, we are doing a lot of background work, we are doing a lot of rethinking on critical information, but we are also, for instance, at ENTSO-E with the 40 TSOs, speaking with each other, how do we bring this cyber awareness and cyber protection to the next level? Because we already have cyber security implemented in regional processes when we exchange common grid models with each other, but we need to bring it to a different level. And we need to think also outside of our own belly button. What is the cyber risk for the total electricity system of the parties connected to the system? Because they also play a role.
There is a different way of risk methods out there in academia. Still try to push it, but also the people who have worked on it, they retired already in TNO. It's generic, but it is not very common. But indeed, these kind of, there are methods to kind of assess like what is our interdependency, and that you also organize a process between TSOs, DSOs, but also with energy suppliers, that you really talk about, hey, I have this risk that I need to manage, but I have this dependency on you. What can you do to help me there, and how can we help each other there? And this, there are methods for it. It's also standardized to some extent, but it's not used because we are so used to this old ISO, blah, 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 and we built it in and baked it in our system. So there is more on the radar, but it needs a change in the process of way of working. So yeah, I would advocate for such a more network-based, because we are a network with a lot of parties, more network-based risk assessment, and it's there. Yeah.
Susanna, I was going to ask you what you think about the split of CEF, but if you want to answer.
I will abstain.
Please start raising your hands if you have questions. I still would like to explore something here, but I'm happy to start taking questions from the audience, if any, of course. While somebody thinks about breaking the ice, I will go back to Remy. The outstanding point that we have not yet discussed, one of them, of course, is permitting, which is crucial in any case. So, and here we really go back to the grids package to a certain extent, because that's the core, one of the cores. Are we going in the right direction? Are we, talking about timing, and we started saying better late than ever in terms of the grids package, but in terms of permitting, are we actually going to say better late than ever at some point in 15 years, or we're moving faster? It looks like we could be moving faster.
Well, it's definitely good to have the permitting on the front page of the grid package. There is an issue regarding the permitting. The permitting or the connection delay cannot be the bottleneck of the energy transition. So we need to put all our efforts to ease and to speed up the connection. But to make it perfectly clear, we are not doing nothing. Permitting is already, if you compare what is going on in the EU, what is going on in France, in other countries, and what is going on in other countries in the world, we are quite good. For a company like Kennedy's, when we mention permitting or grid connection, is one connection every minute and 24 seconds. One new connection to the grid every minute and 24 seconds. So we are connecting a lot on an industrial pace. Could we speed up the process? Sure. Of course, digitalization of the process is part of the solution, even if we are quite digitalized. And then within the permitting, there will be two aspects. There is the part which is on us, and the part which is on the administrative authorities. So we have to work on both, and it's definitely part of the grid package. We have been a bit surprised within the grid package. Grid package is mentioning permitting, but giving an offer or providing you an offer to connect to the grid, in the vocabulary of the DSOs, we are not talking about permitting. We are talking about grid connection, grid authorization. So that's why there is, looking at Tom, maybe some improvement within the way it's drafted currently. Permitting, for us, it's the administrative part. The other part, the part on us, the part on the TSO, is not about permitting. We're not talking about permitting. We are talking about grid connection, grid offer, connection scheme. That's the way we do it. And on the top of that, which is the non-legislative part of the grid package, there is this idea of better managing the queues. And moving from first come, first serve to something different. I say something different because I don't have a perfectly clear view of what could be something different. It could be the more mature first. It could be the first ready, first serve. we could take in consideration the social value of a connection. There is several schemes, but it's good to address this topic, even if it's in a non-legislative way. It's really, really good when we address the question of permitting to also to work with or to think about it hand in hand with managing the queue.
Yeah, Susanna.
Yeah, because I want
so-
to give a different number. On the transmission level, 50% of the transmission projects by the 2030 are still waiting for permits. So in any case, the permitting process can take many, many years, up to a decade, and we think that streamlining the process, looking at environmental procedures, it's still required, the simplification.
I think maybe I can add here, I think that it is very important to speed up the permitting process further. And I think what is in the RED 3, this should also then apply in the amended 10E. I think there is some divergence right now. But the instrument, for example, in Germany, we are also permitting authority on the transmission level. We have made very, very good experiences with the overriding public interest. Since this is in the law, it was a clause that could be inserted during with the crisis regulations. We have speeded up considerably the permitting process. So we have more or less now, I think every major project on the transmission level is now from the permitting side dealt with from the so what you call the administrative side. Yeah. So I think there is some. This is really the leverage to speed up the process.